What would you do if the bank took away the family business your mother spent her entire life building? At 22 years old, Emily Harper thought she had reached the end. Her small flower shop was being foreclosed, her savings were gone, and the future looked hopeless. But just hours before she handed over the keys, a hidden wall collapsed and revealed a mysterious steel safe sealed since the 1920s. What Emily discovered inside would uncover forgotten family secrets, change everything she believed about her past, and prove that some blessings take generations to bloom. Stay with us, because this story is about loss, hope, and a miracle hidden for nearly 100 years. A cold autumn breeze drifted through the historic streets of Savannah, Georgia, while gray clouds gathered above the city and scattered leaves rolled across the sidewalks beneath the fading afternoon light. At 22 years old, Emily Harper stood alone inside Harper Flowers, the small flower shop that had belonged to her family for nearly 70 years. The bell above the front door rarely rang anymore. Most afternoons passed in silence, broken only by the hum of an aging refrigerator and the occasional sound of traffic from the street outside. Emily often found herself staring at the empty shop, trying to remember when it had stopped feeling alive. The store itself remained beautiful despite its age. Shelves lined with ceramic pots stood against exposed brick walls. Framed photographs of weddings, anniversaries, and community celebrations decorated the interior. The scent of roses, lilies, and eucalyptus still lingered in the air. But beauty did not pay bills. Emily Harper was a young woman whose quiet strength often hid the burdens she carried. She stood 5 feet 5 inches tall with a slender frame, long chestnut brown hair that fell naturally past her shoulders, and warm hazel eyes that reflected kindness even during difficult moments. Her fair skin had lost some of its youthful glow over the past year due to stress and exhaustion. Friends from high school once described her as cheerful and optimistic, but grief had changed her. Though she remained compassionate toward others, sadness now lived behind her smile. The past 18 months had been the hardest of her life. Her mother, Margaret Harper, had died from cancer. Margaret had been 51 years old when she passed away. She was a graceful woman with silver blonde hair, gentle blue eyes, and a calm voice that could comfort almost anyone. For decades, she had owned Harper Flowers and had become one of the most beloved figures in Savannah. Customers trusted her not only because of her talent with flowers, but because she remembered birthdays, anniversaries, and personal stories. Even during her illness, she worried more about her customers than herself. Emily had spent nearly 2 years caring for her mother. Hospital visits, medical treatments, endless bills. The savings disappeared first, then the insurance money, then the emergency fund. Eventually, the debt began to grow. When Margaret finally passed away, Emily inherited the flower shop along with every financial problem attached to it. She never considered selling. The shop was all she had left of her mother. Unfortunately, love alone could not save a business. That afternoon, Emily sat behind the counter reviewing invoices. Utility bills sat beside supplier statements. Loan payments remained overdue. Several flower distributors had already reduced shipments because of late payments. She rubbed her tired eyes. The numbers never improved. The door suddenly opened. The small bell chimed overhead. A familiar customer entered carrying a cane. Mrs. Eleanor Brooks was a 78-year-old widow with neatly curled white hair and bright brown eyes. Though age had bent her posture slightly, her spirit remained strong. She visited the flower shop every Friday to buy fresh flowers for her late husband's grave. "Afternoon, Emily," she said warmly. Emily forced a smile. "Hello, Mrs. Brooks." The elderly woman immediately noticed something was wrong. "You look tired, dear." Emily hesitated. "I'll be okay." Mrs. Brooks had lived long enough to recognize hidden pain. She placed a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder. "Your mother would be proud of you." The simple words nearly broke her. For months, Emily had worked 14-hour days trying to keep the business alive. Yet every morning, she woke feeling as though she was losing ground. After Mrs. Brooks left with her bouquet, the shop became quiet again. Emily looked toward a framed photograph hanging behind the register. It showed her and Margaret standing together outside the store several years earlier. Both were smiling. Both looked hopeful. Emily felt tears gathering. "I don't know how much longer I can do this, Mom," she whispered. The answer, of course, never came. As evening approached, she closed the shop and walked upstairs to the small apartment where she lived alone. The apartment had once felt cozy. Now it felt empty. She prepared a simple dinner and checked her email. That was when she saw the message. First Coastal Bank. Her stomach tightened immediately. She already knew what it contained before opening it. The official foreclosure notice appeared on the screen. Past due obligations. Final warning. Property seizure proceedings. The words blurred together. Emily read the message 3 times. The bank was giving her only a few weeks. A few weeks before Harper Flowers would belong to someone else. She slowly lowered the phone. The room felt colder. For several minutes, she sat in silence. She thought about her mother, the shop, the years of memories, everything her family had built. And for the first time since Margaret's death, genuine fear settled into her heart. Not fear of hard work, not fear of sacrifice, fear of losing the last piece of her family. Outside, rain began tapping softly against the apartment window. Inside, Emily stared at the foreclosure notice. She believed she was watching the final chapter of her family's story unfold. What she didn't know was that hidden within the aging walls of Harper Flowers, a secret had been waiting nearly 100 years for someone to find it. And that secret was about to change everything. A steady rain fell across Savannah as gray clouds drifted above the historic district and cold wind rattled the windows of Harper Flowers. The foreclosure notice remained pinned beside the register. Emily Harper had read it so many times that she no longer needed to look at the words. She knew every sentence, every deadline, every threat. The bank would take possession of the building in less than 2 weeks. At first, she fought the reality. Then she tried to negotiate. Then she prayed. Now she simply felt tired. The following Monday morning, the bell above the shop door rang shortly after opening. Emily looked up from a bouquet she was arranging. The man entering wore a dark navy suit despite the rain. His polished shoes clicked softly against the wooden floor. Richard Collins, the bank manager. Emily immediately recognized him. Richard Collins was 59 years old, tall and lean with neatly combed silver hair and sharp gray eyes. His clean-shaven face carried the disciplined appearance of a man who believed deeply in rules and procedures. Years working in banking had taught him to separate emotions from business decisions. Most people considered him fair but distant. He wasn't cruel. In many ways that made the situation harder. It would have been easier to hate him if he enjoyed what he was doing. Instead, he looked uncomfortable. Miss Harper. Emily set down the flowers. Mr. Collins. For several seconds, neither spoke. The scent of roses filled the silence. Finally, Richard removed a folder from beneath his arm. I wanted to deliver the final documents personally. Emily forced herself to nod. She appreciated the gesture, even if it changed nothing. Richard placed the papers on the counter. I am truly sorry. Emily looked at him carefully. The apology seemed genuine. Unfortunately, sincerity didn't erase debt. I know. Richard glanced around the shop. His eyes paused on old photographs hanging on the walls. Wedding arrangements, funeral displays, holiday centerpieces, generations of memories. My wife bought flowers here for 20 years, he said quietly. Emily didn't know what to say. For the first time, she realized Richard wasn't simply a banker. He was another customer who had watched Harper Flowers become part of the community. That realization somehow made the loss feel even worse. News of the foreclosure spread quickly through Savannah. Over the next week, longtime customers began stopping by. Many purchased flowers they didn't really need. Some bought small plants. Others simply came to say goodbye. Mrs. Eleanor Brooks returned twice. Each visit ended with tears. A retired schoolteacher named Harold Jenkins stopped by one afternoon. Harold was 81 years old, thin as a fence post, with white hair and oversized glasses. He had purchased flowers from Margaret Harper every anniversary for nearly 30 years. This town won't feel the same without this place, he told Emily. The words warmed her heart. But warmth couldn't save the building. As the final week approached, shelves gradually emptied. Refrigerators held fewer flowers. Orders became scarce. The reality became impossible to ignore. The last day arrived on a rainy Friday. Emily unlocked the door for what she believed would be the final time. The shop looked strangely beautiful. Morning sunlight occasionally broke through the clouds, illuminating the flowers that remained. Roses, lilies, sunflowers, hydrangeas. The final inventory of a family business. Throughout the day, customers came and went. Many hugged her. Some cried. Others shared stories about her mother. Emily listened to everyone. By late afternoon, only a handful of bouquets remained. She sold the last arrangement to a young couple preparing for their wedding. As they left, silence settled over the store. For the first time in 70 years, Harper Flowers had nothing left to sell. Emily locked the front door. Then she walked slowly through the building, past the refrigerators, past the work tables, past the photographs. Every corner carried memories. She remembered helping her mother sweep floors as a child, learning flower arrangements as a teenager, laughing together during busy holiday seasons. For a moment, she almost expected Margaret to step out from the back room, carrying another box of roses. But the room remained empty. Tears filled her eyes. She climbed a ladder and carefully removed the wooden sign hanging behind the register. Harper Flowers. 3 generations of family history carved into wood. She held it against her chest. Then she sat alone on the floor. The building felt larger now, quieter, like something already becoming a memory. As evening approached, she placed the sign beside the counter and gathered the keys. Tomorrow Richard Collins would return. Tomorrow the bank would officially take possession. Tomorrow Harper Flowers would no longer belong to the Harper family. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. Inside, Emily looked around one final time. She believed she was witnessing the end of her family's story. She had no idea that hidden somewhere within those aging walls, the past was still waiting to speak. And before the keys changed hands, the building would reveal a secret nobody had touched for nearly 100 years. Rain continued falling over Savannah the morning after Harper Flowers officially closed. Gray clouds covered the city while cold wind rattled the old windows of the empty building. Emily Harper arrived shortly after sunrise carrying a toolbox and a thermos of coffee. The bank would not take possession of the property until the following week. Richard Collins had granted her several extra days to remove personal belongings and family keepsakes. It wasn't much, but Emily appreciated the gesture. The shop felt different now, without flowers, without customers, without the constant rhythm of business. For the first time, Emily noticed how old the building truly was. Every floorboard creaked. The brick walls carried decades of repairs. The wooden shelving behind the work area had darkened with age. She spent most of the morning packing boxes, family photographs, account books, her mother's favorite gardening tools. Each item felt like a small funeral. Around noon, Emily moved into the rear storage area. The room sat behind the floral preparation station and had remained largely unchanged for decades. Wooden shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, holding empty pots, vases, ribbons, and forgotten supplies. As she removed the remaining items, something caught her attention. One of the shelves seemed oddly unstable. The back legs didn't sit evenly against the wall. Curious, Emily pushed against it. Nothing happened. She pushed harder. A loud crack echoed through the room. "Great," she muttered. Before she could react, the heavy shelf shifted unexpectedly. Emily jumped backward. The entire structure tipped sideways. Boxes crashed to the floor. Glass shattered. The shelf slammed into the wall with tremendous force. Then something even stranger happened. Part of the brick wall collapsed. A cloud of dust exploded into the room. Emily froze. For several seconds, she simply stared. A section of bricks nearly 4 feet wide had fallen inward, exposing a dark cavity hidden behind the wall. Her heartbeat quickened. The building had been standing for nearly a century. Nobody had ever mentioned a hidden space. She grabbed a flashlight from her toolbox and carefully approached. Dust still floated through the air. The opening appeared intentionally constructed. Not accidental. Not structural. Someone had hidden it. The realization sent chills through her body. Emily shined the flashlight inside. The beam illuminated a narrow chamber built between 2 brick walls. Old wooden beams supported the ceiling. The space looked untouched, as though nobody had entered it for generations. Then the light struck metal. Emily stopped breathing. A large steel safe sat at the center of the hidden compartment. The safe looked ancient. Dust covered every surface. The steel remained surprisingly intact despite its age. Slowly she climbed through the opening. The chamber smelled of old wood and time itself. Kneeling beside the safe, she brushed away decades of dust. Her fingers revealed faded lettering. Harrington Security Company, Savannah, Georgia. Emily stared. 1924. The safe had been hidden for more than 100 years. Her mind raced. Who put it there? Why hide it? Why had nobody mentioned it? Most importantly, what was inside? She searched the safe carefully. The door featured a large combination dial and heavy locking mechanism. No key. No obvious way inside. The craftsmanship appeared extraordinary. Whatever the safe protected had been important. Very important. Emily spent nearly an hour examining the chamber. Other than the safe, very little remained. A few broken boards. Old construction materials. Nothing else. No explanation. No instructions. No clue. Eventually, she climbed back into the shop. Her hands trembled. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't thinking about foreclosure. She wasn't thinking about debt. She wasn't thinking about failure. She was thinking about mystery. Her family had owned Harper flowers for generations. Yet she had never heard a single story about a hidden chamber. Not from her mother. Not from her grandmother. Not from anyone. That afternoon, she called Eleanor Brooks. The elderly woman arrived an hour later. Together, they stood before the collapsed wall. Eleanor adjusted her glasses and stared. "My goodness. You never knew?" Emily asked. Eleanor slowly shook her head. "No." The older woman approached the safe. Her eyes widened when she saw the date. 1924. She looked genuinely shocked. "I knew your grandmother. I knew your great-grandmother." She turned toward Emily. "And I have never heard a single word about this." The answer only deepened the mystery. As evening approached, rain continued tapping against the roof. Emily sat on the floor facing the safe. A foreclosure notice rested on the nearby counter. Just days earlier, it had felt like the most important thing in her life. Now it seemed insignificant compared to the questions hidden behind that steel door. Somewhere in the past, a member of the Harper family had gone to extraordinary lengths to conceal something. And after nearly 100 years of silence, Emily had finally found it. The safe remained locked. The mystery remained unanswered. But for the first time since losing her mother, Emily felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Cold rain continued falling across Savannah as morning fog drifted between the historic buildings downtown and water streamed slowly along the brick sidewalks. Emily Harper barely slept. The discovery of the hidden safe occupied every thought. By sunrise, she was already back inside Harper Flowers, standing before the steel door hidden within the secret chamber. A flashlight rested beside her. Several tools lay scattered on the floor. The foreclosure deadline still existed, but for the first time in weeks it no longer felt like the center of her world. The safe did. She spent the morning trying everything she could think of. Old family documents, birth dates, anniversaries, addresses, every number connected to the Harper family. Nothing worked. The combination dial refused to move beyond its locked position. By noon, she admitted defeat. The safe needed professional help. That afternoon, she called the most experienced locksmith in Savannah. 2 hours later, Frank Moreno arrived. Frank Moreno was 63 years old, short and stocky with olive-toned skin, thinning black hair streaked with gray, and powerful hands shaped by 4 decades of working with locks and metal. His thick mustache and permanent squint made him appear serious, but most people considered him patient and dependable. Years earlier, a warehouse fire had nearly destroyed his business. Rebuilding from nothing had given him deep respect for persistence and hard work. Frank stepped into the hidden chamber and immediately stopped. "Well," he said quietly, "that's not something you see every day." Emily watched hopefully as he examined the safe. He studied the hinges, the steel thickness, the locking mechanism, the manufacturer markings. For nearly an hour, he worked in silence. Finally, he stepped back. His expression concerned her. "Bad news." Frank sighed. "Very bad." Emily's stomach tightened. "The lock isn't damaged." "Then that's good, right?" He shook his head. "Not exactly." Frank ran his hand across the metal surface. This wasn't an ordinary safe. He pointed toward the heavy steel door. Custom construction. Industrial grade. Whoever built this expected someone to try opening it. Emily folded her arms. "So can you do it?" For several seconds, Frank didn't answer. Then he smiled apologetically. "Not without destroying what's inside." The answer hit hard. Emily thanked him anyway. As Frank prepared to leave, something suddenly caught his attention. Near the bottom corner of the safe sat a small, engraved symbol hidden beneath decades of dust. He crouched, wiped away the grime, then frowned. "That's strange." Emily stepped closer. The symbol showed a steam locomotive crossing a circular crest. Surrounding the image appeared faded lettering. Neither could fully read it, but Frank recognized enough to know it wasn't a banking logo. It wasn't a safe company logo either. "I've seen something similar before," he said. "Where?" I can't remember. The answer only deepened the mystery. Later that evening, Eleanor Brooks visited again. After listening to Frank's findings, she suggested speaking with someone else. There's a man at the Savannah Historical Society. Emily looked up. A historian? Eleanor nodded. If anyone knows what that symbol means, it'll be Walter Price. The following morning, Emily drove downtown. The Savannah Historical Society occupied a restored 19th century building overlooking one of the city's oldest squares. Inside, she found Walter Price. Walter Price was 71 years old, tall and remarkably thin, with silver hair combed neatly backward and intelligent blue eyes magnified behind round glasses. His face carried the thoughtful appearance of someone who spent most of his life studying forgotten stories. A former university history professor, Walter had devoted the last 15 years to preserving local history after losing his wife to Alzheimer's disease. Since then, historical research had become both his profession and his way of coping with grief. Walter listened carefully as Emily described the safe. Then she showed him photographs. The moment he saw the symbol, everything changed. His expression froze. Slowly he adjusted his glasses. "Where did you find this?" Emily immediately noticed the seriousness in his voice. "Behind a wall in my family's flower shop." Walter stared at the image for several seconds. Then he sat down. "You have no idea what you found." Emily's pulse quickened. "What is it?" Walter pointed directly at the locomotive emblem. That symbol belonged to the Atlantic Southern Rail Transport Company. The name meant nothing to her. Walter continued. It was one of the largest transportation companies in the Southeast during the early 20th century. Emily frowned. "Never heard of it." "Most people haven't." Walter leaned back. "Because it disappeared nearly 100 years ago." The room suddenly felt smaller. "What happened?" The historian's eyes remained fixed on the photograph. "That's the mystery." He paused. The company vanished during the 1930s. Records disappeared. Assets disappeared. Entire sections of its history simply vanished. Emily stared at him, then back at the photograph. A hidden safe. A forgotten railroad company. A sealed chamber behind her family's wall. Nothing about the situation made sense anymore. And for the first time, she began to suspect the safe contained something far bigger than money. A steady rain drifted across Savannah's historic district while fog rolled in from the river and covered the city in a pale gray silence. For nearly a week, Emily Harper and Walter Price devoted themselves to solving the mystery of the safe. Every morning began inside the hidden chamber behind the flower shop wall. Every evening ended with more questions than answers. Walter spent hours searching archives, newspaper records, and forgotten transportation documents. Emily sorted through old family papers hoping to find a clue her mother or grandmother might have left behind. Nothing worked. The safe remained sealed. Yet Walter refused to give up. On the 6th day, he arrived carrying a stack of yellowed records. His eyes looked brighter than usual. "I think I found something." Emily immediately stood. Walter spread several documents across an old work table. Most contained shipping records from the early 1930s. One name appeared repeatedly. Eleanor Harper. Emily frowned. "My great-grandmother." Walter nodded slowly. She had connections to the railroad company. That revelation alone was shocking. Emily knew almost nothing about Eleanor Harper. The family rarely discussed relatives beyond her grandmother. To her, Eleanor was little more than a name written on an old family tree. Walter pointed toward one document. Eleanor signed several transportation contracts during the Depression. Emily stared. But she owned a flower shop. Eventually, Walter replied. Before that, she appears to have been involved in freight operations. The mystery deepened. 2 days later, a breakthrough finally arrived. Walter located an elderly safe restoration specialist in Charleston who agreed to examine photographs of the locking mechanism. After studying the images, the specialist suggested a forgotten release system hidden beneath the outer plate. The process took hours. Emily's hands shook the entire time. Walter stood beside her. Finally, just before sunset, a loud metallic click echoed through the chamber. Both froze. The sound seemed almost impossible after nearly a century of silence. Slowly the massive door shifted. Dust drifted into the air. The safe opened. Emily held her breath. Gold, jewelry, cash. Those were the things people expected from hidden safes. Instead, the interior revealed something completely different. Boxes, folders, leather-bound journals. bundles of letters tied together with faded ribbon. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Walter looked as confused as Emily. No money, Emily whispered. No gold. Walter carefully removed one of the journals. The leather cover had cracked with age. Across the front appeared a handwritten name. Eleanor Harper. Emily's pulse quickened. The safe wasn't protecting wealth. It was protecting history. They carried the contents upstairs into the flower shop. For hours they sorted documents. Letters, maps, personal notes, newspaper clippings, journal entries. Everything belonged to Eleanor. As Emily read, an entirely different woman began emerging from the pages. Eleanor Harper had been nothing like the quiet grandmother figure she imagined. The photographs inside the journals showed a tall woman with dark auburn hair pinned neatly beneath vintage hats. Her sharp green eyes carried remarkable intelligence and determination. Though elegant in appearance, Eleanor possessed the confidence of someone accustomed to making difficult decisions. During a time when few women held positions of influence, she had managed business operations, negotiated contracts, and traveled extensively throughout Georgia. The journals revealed even more. During the early years of the Great Depression, Eleanor became involved with the Atlantic Southern Rail Transport Company. At first, Emily assumed it was ordinary business. Then she found the letters, dozens of them, many written by desperate families, widows, farmers, store owners, railroad workers, people on the verge of losing everything. The dates corresponded with the worst years of the Depression. Walter read silently over her shoulder. Neither interrupted the other. A pattern gradually emerged. Eleanor had been helping people. Secretly, some letters thanked her for emergency loans. Others described food deliveries, medical assistance, mortgage payments. Entire families survived because of her. Yet nowhere did Eleanor take credit. Nowhere did she seek recognition. Late that evening, Emily opened a sealed envelope hidden within the final journal. Inside rested a folded map. Beneath it sat a handwritten note. The ink had faded but remained readable. If you are reading this, the time has finally come for the truth to be known. Emily's heartbeat accelerated. Walter leaned closer. The note continued. What happened during the Depression must never be forgotten. The answers are where the flowers still grow. Neither understood what the message meant. Not yet. But one thing had become clear. The safe was never meant to hide treasure. It was meant to preserve a secret. And that secret began with Eleanor Harper, a woman whose extraordinary life had been buried by history for nearly 100 years. A cool autumn breeze drifted through Savannah as sunlight finally broke through the clouds, casting long golden shadows across the historic streets. For the next several days, Emily Harper barely left the flower shop. Boxes of documents covered every available surface. Journals lay stacked beside old railroad records. Letters filled entire tables. What began as curiosity had become an obsession. The more she read, the more extraordinary Eleanor Harper became. One evening, while sorting correspondence from 1933, Emily noticed something unusual. Many letters contained no return address. Others used only first names. Several had been intentionally folded around receipts and payment records. At first, the documents seemed unrelated. Then a pattern emerged. Eleanor wasn't simply helping struggling families. She had been financing them. Quietly, secretly, without contracts, without publicity, without recognition. Walter Price sat across from her reviewing another collection of papers. His eyes widened as he examined a ledger. Emily, look at this. She walked over. Walter pointed toward a column of names. Dozens of them. Next to each name appeared amounts of money. Dates. Repayment schedules. Occasionally a single handwritten note. Paid in full. No interest. Emily stared. This is a lending record. Walter nodded. A very large one. The numbers shocked her. Adjusted for modern value, Eleanor had loaned hundreds of thousands of dollars during the worst years of the Great Depression. Most people would have gone bankrupt themselves. Yet Eleanor somehow continued helping. Emily opened another journal. Inside, she found an entry dated February 1934. The handwriting remained elegant and precise. Mr. Calloway begged me not to tell anyone. Pride is sometimes the last possession a man has left. If protecting his dignity helps him stand again, then the secret will remain with me. Emily lowered the journal slowly. The words felt deeply personal. The further she read, the clearer the truth became. Eleanor never viewed the money as business. She viewed it as responsibility. A few days later, Walter arranged meetings with several longtime residents whose families had lived in Savannah for generations. The first was Thomas Calloway. Thomas was 87 years old, tall despite his age, with snow-white hair, deeply lined skin, and sharp gray eyes that revealed a lifetime of wisdom. His family owned one of Savannah's most successful shipping companies. People considered the Calloways one of the city's wealthiest families. When Walter showed him the documents, the old man's expression changed immediately. His hands trembled. "Good Lord," he whispered. Emily exchanged a glance with Walter. "You recognize this?" Thomas nodded slowly. "My father told me a story once." His voice grew quiet. He never mentioned names. He only said that during the Depression, a woman saved our family business. Thomas stared at Eleanor's signature. It was her. Silence filled the room. Days later they met another family. Then another. Again and again the same pattern appeared. The Whitmans, the Donovans, the Harises, some owned successful law firms. Others operated manufacturing companies. Several controlled valuable real estate throughout Savannah. Many were among the most respected families in the city. And almost all shared a hidden connection. At some point during the 1930s, Eleanor Harper had helped them survive financial collapse. Yet not one public record mentioned her involvement. Not one newspaper article gave her credit. Not one monument honored her contributions. Because she had chosen secrecy. One afternoon, Emily discovered a final journal entry written only months before Eleanor's death. The page had been folded carefully. She opened it slowly. "If these families succeed, let their children believe their parents accomplished it alone. Pride can rebuild a life. Public gratitude cannot. What matters is that they survive." Emily read the sentence twice. Then a third time. Tears filled her eyes. For most of her life, she believed her family left behind nothing important. Now she understood something extraordinary. Her great-grandmother had quietly shaped the future of an entire community. Not through wealth, not through power, but through compassion. As word of the discovery slowly spread among Savannah's oldest families, unexpected visitors began arriving at the flower shop. Some brought photographs. Others brought stories passed down through generations. Every conversation revealed another piece of Eleanor's hidden legacy. The mystery of the safe was no longer simply a family secret. It was becoming part of the town's history. Yet one question continued haunting Emily. If Eleanor went to such lengths to hide these records, why preserve them at all? The answer seemed connected to the map found inside the safe. The map still rested folded beside her desk, waiting, just like the final clues Eleanor had left behind. And somewhere beyond Savannah, another secret remained hidden, untouched since the days of the Great Depression. A gentle autumn sun broke through the clouds above Savannah while cool morning mist drifted across the marshlands beyond the city limits. For nearly a week, Emily Harper could think of little else besides the map hidden inside Eleanor Harper's safe. The faded parchment lay unfolded across the old flower shop counter. Every crease, every handwritten mark, every note had been carefully examined. At first glance, the map appeared ordinary. But Walter Price eventually noticed something unusual. Several landmarks marked on the map no longer existed. Old railway crossings, abandoned service roads, property boundaries from nearly a century earlier. Using historical land records, Walter slowly reconstructed the route. The destination pointed toward a forgotten section of land nearly 20 miles outside Savannah, a place that no longer appeared on modern maps. 2 days later, Emily and Walter set out before sunrise. The drive took them through winding country roads lined with oak trees draped in Spanish moss. The further they traveled, the more isolated the landscape became. Eventually, the paved road ended. A narrow dirt trail continued through dense woodland. Walter parked his aging SUV beside a rusted gate. Beyond it stood several acres of overgrown property hidden behind decades of neglect. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Emily noticed something. Glass. Sunlight reflected from somewhere deep inside the trees. Her heartbeat quickened. Together they pushed through thick vegetation. Branches scraped against their clothes. Vines covered nearly everything. Then the forest suddenly opened. Emily stopped in disbelief. Before them stood an enormous greenhouse, or at least what remained of one. The structure stretched across nearly an acre of land. Much of the glass roof had shattered long ago. Rust covered sections of the iron framework. Trees and flowering vines had partially reclaimed the building. Yet despite the years of abandonment, the greenhouse still stood, like a forgotten cathedral hidden by nature. Walter removed his glasses. "My God," Emily whispered the same words. Near the entrance, a weathered bronze plaque remained attached to a stone pillar. The inscription had faded but remained readable. Harper Horticultural Conservatory. Established 1931. Emily felt chills run through her body. Eleanor had built this place. Slowly they stepped inside. The air felt different immediately. Warm, humid, alive. Sunlight filtered through broken glass panels overhead. Plants covered nearly every corner. Some climbed the steel supports. Others filled ancient planting beds. Flowers bloomed in colors Emily had never seen before. Deep crimson roses, pale silver orchids, golden lilies with unusual petal patterns. Entire sections appeared untouched for decades. Yet somehow they had survived. Walter stared around in amazement. This shouldn't be possible. Emily understood exactly what he meant. Many of the species appeared extraordinarily rare. Some looked completely unfamiliar. As they explored further, they discovered old work tables covered in journals and botanical sketches preserved inside metal cabinets. One cabinet contained hundreds of carefully organized records. Plant breeding notes, growth experiments, cross-pollination results. Everything written in Eleanor Harper's elegant handwriting. For hours they examined the documents. A picture gradually emerged. Eleanor had spent nearly 30 years developing and preserving flower varieties. Not as a hobby, as a mission. Among the records, Emily found a photograph of a younger Eleanor standing beside another woman. The back of the photograph identified her as Dr. Clara Whitmore. Clara Whitmore had been one of the first female botanists in the southeastern United States. Tall and slender with dark hair often pinned beneath practical work hats, she possessed sharp features, intelligent brown eyes, and an intense passion for plant conservation. During an era when women rarely held scientific positions, Clara earned respect through determination and groundbreaking research. The journals revealed she and Eleanor had worked together for many years. One entry particularly caught Emily's attention. Many native species are disappearing faster than anyone realizes. If we do not preserve them now, future generations may never know they existed. The journal was dated 1948. Emily looked around the greenhouse. Suddenly everything made sense. The flowers, the records, the secrecy. This wasn't merely a collection. It was a preservation project, a sanctuary. Eleanor had been protecting rare plant genetics long before conservation became common practice. Late that afternoon, Emily opened one final metal cabinet hidden beneath a collapsed section of shelving. Inside rested dozens of sealed envelopes addressed to universities, botanical institutions, and agricultural research centers. None had ever been mailed. At the bottom lay another letter written specifically for future members of the Harper family. Emily carefully unfolded the paper. The opening sentence made her heart stop. "If you have found this greenhouse, then you are finally ready to discover why I protected these flowers for so many years." The mystery wasn't ending. It was growing larger. And somewhere within the greenhouse Eleanor Harper had spent decades building, the greatest secret of all was still waiting to be uncovered. Bright autumn sunlight poured through the broken glass roof of the forgotten greenhouse, while a cool breeze carried the scent of flowers across the quiet countryside outside Savannah. For nearly 2 weeks after discovering the greenhouse, Emily Harper barely left the property. Every day brought another surprise. Every row of flowers seemed to hold another secret Eleanor Harper had carefully protected. What began as a family mystery was quickly becoming something much larger. Walter Price understood that they needed expert opinions. Neither of them possessed the scientific knowledge necessary to evaluate what they had found. Reluctantly, Emily agreed. Part of her feared losing control of the discovery. Another part worried that nobody would believe them. 3 days later, the first specialists arrived. The team came from the University of Georgia's Department of Botanical Sciences. Leading the group was Dr. Rachel Monroe. Rachel Monroe was 48 years old, tall and athletic with shoulder-length dark hair streaked with silver and sharp hazel eyes that constantly searched for details others missed. Years spent conducting field research had given her a practical personality and remarkable patience. Colleagues respected her because she valued evidence over assumptions. She had spent more than 20 years studying endangered plant species throughout North America. The moment Rachel entered the greenhouse, her expression changed. She stopped walking, Several members of her team nearly collided with her. For almost a minute, she simply stared. Emily immediately noticed. "What is it?" Rachel approached a cluster of pale blue orchids growing near one of the eastern walls. Her hands trembled slightly. "That's impossible." The words sent chills through Emily. Rachel carefully examined the flowers. Then another section. Then another. The deeper she explored, the quieter she became. By afternoon, the entire team was moving through the greenhouse with increasing excitement. They photographed everything, collected samples, compared records, cross-referenced historical databases. Late that evening, Rachel finally sat down across from Emily and Walter. Her face looked pale. "Do you understand what you have here?" Emily slowly shook her head. Rachel exhaled. "Neither do we." The answer surprised everyone. Rachel continued. "Several of these flower varieties were believed extinct." Walter leaned forward. "Extinct." Rachel nodded. "Not endangered. Not rare. Extinct." Silence filled the room. She opened a folder. Inside were photographs and scientific records. One orchid species had disappeared from documented records in the 1950s. A particular hybrid lily vanished during the 1940s. Several unique rose varieties existed only in historical archives. Yet all of them stood alive inside Eleanor Harper's greenhouse. Emily stared toward the glass structure. For years she had worried about losing a flower shop. Now scientists were telling her she possessed something potentially irreplaceable. The news spread quickly, much faster than anyone expected. Within weeks, additional experts arrived. Research institutions, botanical foundations, conservation organizations, national publications. Soon reporters began calling. Then television stations. Then universities from outside Georgia. Harper Flowers, once facing foreclosure, suddenly found itself at the center of a national story. The most surprising visitor arrived 1 month later. His name was Dr. Nathan Cole. Nathan was 61 years old, lean and distinguished, with silver hair, a neatly trimmed beard, and calm blue eyes that reflected decades of scientific work. Widely considered one of America's leading experts in plant genetics, he rarely traveled unless a discovery truly interested him. This discovery fascinated him. After 3 days studying Eleanor's records, Nathan reached a conclusion that stunned everyone. "The flowers are valuable." Emily nodded. She already understood that. Nathan shook his head. "No, you don't understand." He opened several reports. "The flowers themselves are only part of the story." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" Nathan pointed toward Eleanor's journals. "These breeding records are extraordinary." According to his analysis, Eleanor and Clara Whitmore had spent decades documenting genetic traits, disease resistance, climate adaptation, and cross-pollination methods. Many of their techniques were decades ahead of their time. Some research topics wouldn't become common scientific practice until generations later. Walter sat speechless. Nathan smiled. "Your great-grandmother wasn't simply a gardener. She was a pioneer." By winter, official estimates began arriving. The greenhouse collection, the preserved genetics, the research records, the commercial possibilities. Combined value reached into the millions of dollars. Emily often found the numbers difficult to comprehend. Only months earlier, she couldn't pay utility bills. Now people discussed grants, preservation projects, and international partnerships. Yet one evening, after the reporters left and the scientists returned home, Emily walked alone through the greenhouse. The flowers glowed softly beneath the setting sun. For a moment, she imagined Eleanor standing among them, not thinking about money, not thinking about fame, simply protecting something beautiful for future generations. That realization mattered more than any valuation report, because the greatest thing Eleanor had preserved wasn't wealth. It was hope, and that hope was about to save Harper Flowers, just as it had once saved so many lives during the Great Depression. A cool winter breeze moved through Savannah's historic streets, while golden afternoon sunlight reflected from shop windows and cast long shadows across the city. The discovery of Eleanor Harper's greenhouse had changed everything. News reports continued appearing across Georgia and beyond. Researchers traveled from multiple states. Conservation organizations offered partnerships. Journalists requested interviews almost daily. For the first time in months, Emily Harper no longer worried about losing Harper Flowers. The foreclosure proceedings had been suspended. The bank itself had requested additional meetings. Yet despite all the attention, Emily remained focused on something else. The letters. Every evening after the visitors left, She returned to Eleanor's journals and personal correspondence. The flowers had revealed one legacy. The letters were revealing another. One cold December afternoon, the bell above the flower shop door rang unexpectedly. Emily looked up from a stack of documents. A familiar figure stood quietly near the entrance. Richard Collins. For a moment, neither spoke. The last time he had stood in that building, he was preparing to take it away from her. Now the circumstances felt very different. Richard appeared older than Emily remembered. The past several months seemed to have added new lines to his face. His silver hair remained neatly combed, but his usual confidence appeared subdued. "May I come in?" he asked. Emily nodded. "Of course." Richard walked slowly through the shop. The restored flower displays, the framed photographs, the fresh arrangements filling the room. Everything that once seemed destined to disappear now felt alive again. He stopped beside the counter. "I owe you an apology." Emily listened quietly. Richard took a slow breath. "For months I looked at this place and saw a failed business." His eyes moved around the room. A debt, a liability, a balance sheet. The words carried genuine regret. "I never stopped to ask what it meant to the people connected to it." Emily said nothing. She could tell this wasn't easy for him. Richard had spent nearly 40 years working in banking. Numbers had become his language. Risk assessments, profit margins, collateral values. Those were the things he understood. Yet the discoveries surrounding Eleanor Harper had forced him to confront something numbers couldn't explain. Richard slowly removed a small envelope from his coat pocket. "I found something while cleaning my father's belongings." Emily looked surprised. He handed it to her. Inside rested an old black and white photograph. A much younger Eleanor Harper stood beside several families outside a warehouse during the Depression. One of the children in the photograph looked familiar. Richard pointed. "That's my father." Emily blinked. "What?" Richard nodded. His voice softened. "My grandfather lost everything in 1932. The banker stared at Eleanor's image. "Our family nearly went bankrupt." Emily felt her heart tighten. Richard continued. "My father always talked about a woman who helped them survive. He never knew her full story. He never even knew how much she sacrificed." For several moments the room remained silent. The realization clearly affected him. One of Savannah's most respected bankers had unknowingly spent decades connected to the very family he almost foreclosed upon. Emily walked toward a nearby table. Several boxes of Eleanor's letters rested there. She opened one carefully, then another. Finally, she handed Richard a journal. "Read this." He adjusted his glasses and began reading. Minutes passed, then more. Emily watched his expression gradually change. The journal entry described a struggling family whose business had collapsed during the Depression. Eleanor provided financial support anonymously. The family eventually recovered. Years later, they became successful. Yet Eleanor never revealed her involvement. When Richard finished reading, he quietly closed the journal. His eyes appeared moist. "I've spent my entire career evaluating value." Emily sat across from him. Richard looked down at the worn pages. "And somehow I missed the most important kind." The statement lingered between them. Outside, traffic moved through Savannah as usual. Inside, two generations connected through a century-old act of kindness sat in silence. Eventually, Richard smiled. Not the professional smile of a banker. A human smile. The kind born from humility. "Eleanor Harper understood something I didn't." Emily tilted her head. "What was that?" Richard looked toward the photograph. "The strongest investments aren't made in businesses. They're made in people." For the first time since meeting him, Emily saw Richard not as the man who nearly took everything away, but as someone capable of learning, someone capable of changing. As the afternoon sunlight faded, he stood to leave. Before reaching the door, he paused. Then he turned back toward her. "You know," he said softly, "your family was never poor." Emily frowned slightly. Richard smiled. "No family that leaves behind a legacy like this could ever be poor." Then he walked out into the winter sunlight. Emily remained standing beside Eleanor's journals. For years, she had believed her family's greatest inheritance was hidden inside a safe. Now she understood the truth. The real treasure had never been hidden behind steel doors. It had always been hidden inside the lives Eleanor Harper changed. A warm spring breeze drifted through Savannah as sunlight shimmered across thousands of blooming flowers and birds sang from the towering oak trees surrounding Harper Gardens. 10 years had passed. Sometimes Emily Harper still found it difficult to believe. She stood near the entrance of Harper Gardens early one morning before visitors arrived. The grounds stretched across dozens of acres. Walking paths wound through gardens filled with rare flowers once believed extinct. Historic greenhouses gleamed beneath the Georgia sun. Research centers worked alongside conservation programs. Students traveled from around the world to study Eleanor Harper's preserved collections. What had once been a struggling flower shop facing foreclosure had become the largest heritage flower conservation center in Georgia. More than 200,000 visitors arrived each year. The old Harper Flowers storefront still stood near the center of the property. Emily had refused to tear it down. Instead, she restored every detail. The wooden floors, the brick walls, the original flower counter. Even the bell above the door remained exactly where it had been when her mother greeted customers decades earlier. To Emily, that little shop would always be the true heart of everything. Now 32 years old, Emily carried herself with a confidence that had been impossible to imagine 10 years earlier. Her chestnut brown hair showed faint traces of sunlight from years spent outdoors. Her hazel eyes still held kindness, but the uncertainty that once lived behind them had disappeared. Experience, hardship, and purpose had shaped her into a leader respected throughout the state. Yet she remained the same woman who loved flowers more than attention. That morning she walked toward the main entrance. There stood the statue, Eleanor Harper. The bronze monument showed her great-grandmother holding a single flower in one hand and a journal in the other. The sculptor had captured both strength and compassion in her expression. Fresh flowers surrounded the base every day. Many were left anonymously, a tradition that had begun years earlier. Emily stopped before the statue, as she often did. Around her, employees prepared for another busy day. One of them approached carrying several folders. His name was Benjamin Reed. Benjamin was 27 years old, tall and lean with curly dark hair, warm brown eyes, and an easy smile that immediately put people at ease. Years earlier, he had entered the foster care system after losing both parents in a car accident. Like many young adults leaving state care, he struggled to find stability. A scholarship program funded by Harper Gardens helped him attend college. He later returned as one of the organization's conservation directors. Benjamin often said Harper Gardens had given him a future when he thought none existed. "The school group from Atlanta arrives in an hour," he said. Emily smiled. "Everything ready?" Benjamin nodded. Like always. As he walked away, Emily looked across the grounds. Children would soon fill the gardens. Families would walk the trails. Researchers would continue studying Eleanor's work. Young people would receive scholarships funded by the foundation Emily created. The legacy continued growing. Not because of money, because of people. A few minutes later, a tour group entered through the gates. An elderly woman paused beside the statue. Emily watched from a distance. The woman carefully placed a flower at Eleanor's feet. Then she quietly walked away. No speech, no recognition, just gratitude. Moments like that happened almost every day. Years earlier, Emily might have measured success differently. Revenue, property values, recognition. Now she understood what truly mattered. The greatest things Eleanor left behind could never be deposited into a bank account. Kindness, compassion, hope. Those gifts continued multiplying long after she was gone. As afternoon sunlight filled the gardens, Emily entered the restored flower shop. The original safe sat inside a glass display case. Nearby rested Eleanor's journals, the letters, the map, the documents that changed everything. Visitors often expected treasure, gold, jewels, fortunes. Emily always smiled when they asked, because they misunderstood. The treasure had never been inside the safe. The treasure had always been inside Eleanor herself. Late that evening, after the visitors left and silence returned to the gardens, Emily sat alone on a bench facing the greenhouse. Flowers swayed gently in the fading light. For a moment she thought about her mother, about the foreclosure notice, about the fear that once controlled her life. Then she thought about Eleanor, a woman who quietly planted seeds of kindness without knowing who might someday benefit from them. The flowers blooming around her were proof of that truth. Some seeds take weeks to grow, some take years, and some take generations. But when they finally bloom, they can change the world. And every day as she walked through Harper Gardens, Emily remembered the lesson her great-grandmother left behind. Eleanor Harper did not leave money. She left kindness. And like every seed planted with love, kindness sometimes takes decades to blossom into a miracle. Sometimes, God does not send miracles the way we expect. Sometimes they do not arrive as sudden fortunes, winning lottery tickets, or treasures hidden beneath the ground. Sometimes they arrive as a letter that survives 100 years, a kindness that was never forgotten, a seed planted by someone who believed in doing good even when nobody was watching. Emily spent much of her life believing she had been abandoned. She thought her family's story was ending. But God was quietly working through generations, preparing a blessing she could not yet see. What looked like an ending was actually the beginning of a miracle decades in the making. The truth is, many people around us are carrying burdens we know nothing about. Some are struggling financially. Some are grieving someone they love. Some are fighting loneliness behind a smile. And some are wondering if their efforts, sacrifices, and kindness matter at all. This story reminds us that they do. Every act of kindness matters. Every encouraging word matters. Every helping hand matters. You may never see the full impact of the good you do today. Just like Eleanor Harper, the seeds you plant may continue growing long after you're gone. And sometimes, God uses ordinary people to create extraordinary blessings for future generations. So if this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from and what lesson stayed with you the most. And if you enjoy stories about faith, hope, family, and second chances, please subscribe to the channel and join our growing community. May God bless you, your family, your home, and everyone you love. May He give strength to those facing difficult seasons, comfort to those carrying grief, and hope to those who feel forgotten. And may you always remember that even the smallest seed planted with love can one day bloom into a miracle. Thank you for watching, and God bless you.